current mission that the US and that the Israelis are undertaking has to be successful, which is not decapitation, it has to be defanging.
Party time could last for one night, but it's time to do what we can to support the folks inside Iran.
Their behavior seems like a kid who goes to his mom and dad and says, I want some cookies. They say, no, it's not a good time for it. And then he picks up all his crayons and starts painting and scratching all the walls in the house.
The only real way to win is for the system that these guys serve to also collapse.
I didn't think that Khamenei could have been targeted this early, and as one of my friends put it, I didn't think he's going to give up that easily and die so quickly.
And there's no universe that I know of where if you bomb a missile base in Khorramabad, a protester in Mashhad feels safe.
Hi there, this is episode 420 of Roqe. A free Iran can change the world. Since the military intervention by the U.S. and Israel began, a predictable refrain has echoed across Western commentary. Why should we get involved? This is a foreign dictatorship. This has nothing to do with us. And of course, regime change is not in our interest. On the contrary, set aside for a moment the humanitarian case, set aside the moral imperative of Iranian lives, a free Iran would not be a local event, it would be a geopolitical pivot. So let's walk through 4 reasons a free Iran can change the world. First, security architecture. For nearly half a century, the Islamic Republic has functioned not merely as a repressive domestic regime, but as a transnational destabilizer. It has financed, armed, and trained proxy forces across the Middle East. It has embedded itself in Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Yemen. It has turned hostage-taking, ballistic missiles, and militia networks into instruments of statecraft. Remove that regime, and you don't magically create peace. History doesn't work that way, but you do remove one of the principal engines of chronic instability in the region. Energy markets recalibrate, shipping lanes de-risk. Second, economic transformation. 90 million people, young, highly educated, entrepreneurial, a country with vast natural resources and one of the largest untapped consumer markets in the world. A normalized Iran would not be a charity case. It would be one of the most sought-after emerging markets on earth. Energy partnerships, aviation, infrastructure, technology, tourism. European and American firms would not be debating whether to enter. They would be competing for access. Third, migration and extremism. Authoritarian regimes do not contain their failures. They export them. Repression fuels displacement. Economic decay fuels migration. Ideological militancy fuels radical networks. A democratic Iran would anchor its region rather than destabilize it. Fewer refugees, fewer proxy wars. And finally, fourth, civilizational restoration. As Thomas Friedman wrote in today's New York Times about the regime falling, there is no single event that would do more to put the whole Middle East on a more decent, inclusive trajectory. Iran is not a marginal state. It is a civilizational center. For centuries, it shaped trade routes, philosophy, science, poetry. What has constrained it is not culture. It is governance. Release that potential, and you don't simply liberate Iranians. You rebalance a region. So when someone asks, why should we care? Well, because a free Iran would not simply change Iran. It would alter the strategic, economic, and moral landscape of the 21st century. And that is not someone else's problem. It's March 2nd, 2026. This is Roqe. Hello, welcome to episode 420 of Roqe, Iran Rises. I'm Jian Ghomeshi. Hello to you from Toronto, Canada. Salam, dostan aziz, durud bar shoma. Hope you're doing okay. Wherever you are tuning in from around the world, what an epic weekend we've just had. This is the 17th episode in our Iran Rises series, and this one entitled Zahhak is Dead. What's next? And once again, we should remind you and remind ourselves that events inside Iran and around the Iranian diaspora are moving at a breakneck speed, as you probably know. So we should note that we are recording this episode at approximately 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time here in Toronto on this Monday, March 2nd. And that's around midnight inside Iran. And as always, we're sharing perspectives and conversations as up to date as humanly possible. So you'll forgive us if we miss something that breaks in the next few hours before we post this. Coming up on this edition of Roqe, this past weekend was unlike anything we've seen in decades. A joint U.S.-Israel military operation began with sweeping airstrikes across Iranian territory, hitting hundreds of targets and marking a dramatic escalation in a conflict already reshaping the region and taking on the Islamic Republic regime, as the American president had promised. And in the course of those strikes, Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei was killed. A development that's been confirmed by multiple national leaders and state media, and that has reverberated across Iran and around the world. There were scenes of celebration in Iranian cities and diaspora communities across the globe. We were part of that if you went on the big demonstration here in Toronto. But it's only one step. And was this actually a turning point for Iran or something far more volatile? Is celebration appropriate for long-suffering Iranians or premature? And is the United States and Israel's strategy coherent, or are key powers essentially making it up as they go with frightening consequences? We want to explore whether a so-called power vacuum could be filled by more clerical authority, or whether structural shifts inside Iran really are underway. Plus, does having a visible opposition leader make a real difference in how this movement unfolds? Joining me for this deep strategic conversation are Behnam Ben Taleblu and Shayan Samii. Let's get to it. Today's episode of Roqe is brought to you in part by Stellar Law. Stellar Law is a boutique litigation firm based in Toronto, founded and led by Rana Nosrat Pana. The firm represents businesses and professionals in commercial and contractual disputes, particularly where relationships have broken down and the consequences are significant. Stellar Law's practice is grounded in careful analysis and strategic decision-making. Much of the work involves contract disputes, shareholder conflicts, complex business disagreements that require both legal precision and practical judgment. Rana and her team are known for approaching these matters with clarity, focus, and a deep understanding of what is at stake for their clients. For those navigating serious disputes and with real commercial impact, check out Stellar Law at stellarlaw.ca, stellarlaw.ca. Thanks again to Rana Nosrat and the team at Stellar Law. And if you are Iranian, do note that Stellar Law operates in both English and Persian if you prefer to deal in Persian. This episode of Roqe is brought to you with the support of Avoca chocolate. So in the last couple of weeks, I have been telling you how grateful we are that this small non-Iranian company in Toronto has stepped up to support Iranians in this time. Noni Fenby and her staff have been at our rallies, chanting our slogans, and doing what they can to support those in Iran. They've also made free Iran chocolates, and with all the profits going to aid the Toronto demonstrations for a free Iran. Avoca has been making handmade artisanal chocolate in Toronto for over 30 years. Family owned and operated, they have dedicated themselves to the art of delicious treats, and including truffles and ice cream and gelato. Made without compromise, Avoca has focused on high quality ingredients with fair trade chocolate, all made fresh daily in one of their 2 locations in East Toronto. If you're in Toronto, go visit one of their great chocolate shops and thank them for their support. And the free Iran bars are now available. They're top quality Belgian chocolate. They are each handmade and painted, with the profits being given to the Iranian community. If you cannot go in person, you can get the chocolates online at avocachocolates.com. Thank you again for your support of Roqe and the Iranian people. avocachocolates.com. All right, let's get to our panel. Shayan Samii is a U.S. national security analyst and a Near East Africa and South Asia expert specializing in strategic communications. You may have seen him on Persian news outlets such as Iran International. He's also been something of a regular here for us on Roqe since the beginning of this Lion and Sun revolution. He joins us from Vienna, Virginia. And also joining us is an Iranian-American political scientist who has as his focus Iran's security and political issues. Behnam Ben Taleblu is the Iran Program Senior Director and Senior Fellow at FDD, the Foundation for Defense of Democracies in Washington. His area of expertise includes a vast range of Iran-related issues, such as the IRGC, sanctions, ballistic missiles, and nuclear non-proliferation. He's fresh from an appearance on CNN last night. He also has testified before the U.S. Congress and the Canadian Parliament and has provided testimony to the British House of Commons. Behnam Ben Taleblu joins us from Washington, D.C. Hello to you both.
Greetings.
Hi, good to be with you.
Good to have you on this program on this Monday, and a Monday after what can only be described as an epic weekend in the Iranian space. I've talked for 2 months about how we're toggling between elation and deflation in terms of our emotions, and we certainly had some elation this weekend. First of all, just as a general question, let me ask you both: how would you characterize the events of the last 48 hours vis-a-vis Iran and the Iranian struggle? Shayan?
During this movement and this revolution that has started, we all have been thinking about, and we heard from family members and relatives who are still in Iran, Ki mizane, when are they going to hit? When it's going to happen? And we didn't know. I mean, we knew that something will eventually happen if the right moment comes. But quite frankly, I didn't think that Khamenei could have been targeted this early. And as one of my friends put it, I didn't think he's going to give up that easily and die so quickly. But it was a watershed moment. It was one of those things that you keep reading about it and you keep looking at the news and you really genuinely don't believe it because you have been wanting it for so long. And now that it has presented itself, you're like, did it really happen? But historically, if we look at it, dictators around the world don't ever know and don't ever realize that their 90th minute has come and passed and they're still thinking that there is time left for their craziness. Khamenei genuinely didn't think that he's going to get targeted because he kept saying, we're not going to talk and there's not going to be any attacks. Well, you didn't talk and there was attacks. So, but for me, it was a moment of absolute jubilation and at the same time thinking that the mission is not accomplished. We still have a lot of ways to go.
Just to ask you about something you said there. I mean, I assume you were being sarcastic or sardonic when you said he wouldn't give up this easily. I mean, he didn't have a choice, did he?
No, because when the Israelis dropped 30 to 35 bombs on his complex, I mean, where is he going to go? What can he do?
And why did you think? Why did you? I mean, I agree with you. I don't know who saw this coming necessarily, but why did you have a sense that it would not happen this quickly?
Because of the apparatus that had been built around him, that we kept hearing that he has underground bunkers. He hid himself during the 12-day war, so everybody thought, oh, he's going to go to one of those places. And the fact that we had been hearing for years that his complex is the most fortified place. There is a hospital 6 levels below ground. There that he might be kept there. So all of these things, right. And then all of a sudden to realize that no, he was in a room and that room got attacked and he got blown up.
Behnam, if you were writing the summary, the film synopsis of the last 48 hours, how would you characterize it?
Well, first of all, it's great to see you again virtually, Shayan, virtually, Jian. Thanks for having me back. Always a pleasure. How I would characterize it? Historic and nail-biting. Full stop. Historic and nail-biting. I mean, I totally agree with what Shayan was saying about the ebbs and the flows and the feelings and the emotions of not just Iranians in the country, but Iranians in the diaspora across 4 or 5 different continents, going from loving Trump to hating Trump within just a few hours of every day based on news of potential strikes or potential talks. But going after the longest serving dictator in the Middle East, actually, the Israelis going after the longest serving dictator in the Middle East. We've seen a lot of decapitation operations in the Middle East. Seldom do you get a sitting state leader. Saddam was physically captured, but you look at the past 2 decades of targeted strikes of leaders, quote unquote, they're all non-state terror group leaders, whether it's Soleimani, bin Laden, Baghdadi, Sinwar, Nasrallah, all non-state leaders. But Ali Khamenei led the world's foremost state sponsor of terrorism. He was quite literally the supreme leader of Iran. He was quite literally the longest serving dictator in the Middle East. And in the opening gambit of what could be a conflict that is going to be, if I had to guess now, much larger than the 12-day war, he was taken out.
If I can ask something that I ask almost tentatively because I don't want to be perceived as raining on the parade, but first of all, I get the catharsis of and Shayan, what you described as jubilation of hearing about Khamenei's death. In the sense that, I mean, we were on a demonstration here in Toronto at the time. We heard the news, and the demonstration that was already quite loud, it just erupted into joy and jubilation. And in fact, I started crying, quite emotionally. And the last 47 years of not being able to see family in Iran and go back and all that stuff was flashing through my eyes. And so I get the emotion and the celebration, but part of me, and certainly as we went into Saturday night and then yesterday, part of me has been feeling a bit of a knot in my stomach as well about the fact that I don't want this celebration to be overdone or premature, because I feel like this is a step, and there are such difficult days ahead, and I worry about. I mean, listen, inside Iran, celebration. Go for it if you can, and in your homes, etc. But for those of us in the diaspora, this is a marathon, not a sprint. And party time could last for one night, but it's time to do what we can to support the folks inside Iran. So tell me about whether you believe or whether you understand what I'm saying, and if you think celebration is appropriate just yet, Shayan.
Oh, hell yes. Because people have been waiting and holding their breath for the last 47 years to realize when this moment will come, that at least one of the people in the upper echelon of this dictatorship would meet his maker and would see his demise, and the people would get the opportunity to at least dance on his grave. Because I'll give you an example. As you know, Jian, there in Washington, D.C., every Saturday we have demonstrations and protests. And we had one scheduled this week as a candlelight vigil to remember those who have given their lives in this path. But when we got there, the music was blaring. It was Andy's song Daram Miram Be Tehran, and people were dancing to the best of their abilities. I mean, and that's why I felt at that moment that this really is a game changer, that the people are getting that shot in the arm that, hey, for those in the diaspora, that their efforts and their sustained efforts to bring the voice of the Iranians to the leadership in their respective countries that they live has worked. They have been listened to. And for the people in Iran to know that, hey, when we say we are behind you and we got your back, it literally means yes. And it was held. This past Saturday in DC, we had 15,000 people coming out. And it was from one of the most important words that they were using is because in the past we kept chanting Despot Khamenei, we will bring you down, but this time people were yelling, he was brought down, he was brought down. So that moment again was a feel good moment, and at the same time a shot in the arm that, hey, sustained effort works, but it's not done. We shouldn't let go of the gas pedal, and we should just march forward.
Behnam?
I might be channeling what you said about. I don't want to use the word raining on the parade, but there's several things to unpack here. One is I remember the news when I saw the news of the facility, his compound being bombed. Almost instantly, I was like, "There's no way he made it out," because there's, in my view, no way America or Israel would have authorized that daylight operation had they not been certain that he was there. So I kind of was emotionally, mentally prepared for with the news that came out 4 to 6 hours later that Khamenei would have been killed, and he was killed in that operation. From that flows, this might sound weird, but all I got that day, I mean, maybe because we're in this weird profession where we have to go on TV, but all I got that day was just one deep breath, one sigh of relief, and then back at it.
Yeah.
Because it's not just a marathon for us inside or outside Iran, it's a marathon for everybody. One of the unfortunate facts about the Islamic Republic is Khamenei was so successful because he institutionalized his power and his authority. And we are nowhere near done. And in fact, the worst position for us to be in is to take this as a premature victory lap. It doesn't mean it shouldn't be celebrated, but it means we have to be very cautious. We are in a very interesting moment as a society, and I mean, as a society of Iranians in the diaspora and Iranians back in the country, where we are among the most nationalistic people on this planet, not just this region. Yeah. Yet what unites so many of us right now, particularly for me, what moved me to write recently in Foreign Affairs, something that I got in this industry to stop, which was about war. What moved me to write to say, go big, America, was what we saw in January. I mean, obviously everybody's heart had been coming out from Dayaneva, the Shish, and Albananeva, from that whole trend line. All of those protests were not protests. They were iterations of a larger national uprising. And there is still much unfinished business.
And they're still in power. They're still in power.
Exactly. Yeah. I don't know a lot of states where you kill the commander in chief, you got the commanding heights of the military establishment, and they're still able to fire missiles and drones. And, you talked about not being over this stuff. I spend so much time here in D.C. Shayan knows when we're on international together, I'm talking about missiles and guns and bombs and things of that nature. I'm in terms of not being over, I'm not over the killing of Hajizadeh in the opening phases of the 12-day war. Yeah. So we will process this stuff, but the only real way to win is for the system that these guys serve to also collapse. And there we cannot put the cart before the horse. I remember so many Iranians, sorry, last thing, again, with that turbulence of being pro-Trump and anti-Trump and pro-Bibi and anti-Bibi from all of January and February. And all I would just say to them, from friends, family, loved ones, colleagues, contacts, wait, just wait. We cannot afford, at this moment is too critical. Yes, too much blood has been spilled, but that's precisely why it cannot be sacrificed. It cannot be thrown out. And this moment is too historic of a moment to do away with a celebratory premature victory lap. The worst thing right now is if America endorses musical chairs at the top rather than regime change from the bottom.
Well, let me ask you about that. Let me ask you precisely about that, because the predominant criticism, I suppose, amongst pundits in the West of this action by the United States and Israel, I mean, amongst those who are at least willing to have a conversation. Of course, there's some who just are reflexively anti-war or have an agenda, et cetera. Let's put those folks aside. The people I've seen on these mainstream media outlets, et cetera, who are critical of what has happened here, say that, well, you've gotten rid of the leadership, or you've gotten rid of the supreme leader at least, but with no plan after that. I even saw Karim Sajapour say on CNN on Saturday, or I think it was on Saturday, I could be doing it yesterday, that Trump appears to be making it up as he's going along. Which was kind of alarming to hear from somebody that is ostensibly an insider who's thought a lot about this stuff. Do you agree with that? Do you feel like there's no plan here, Shayan?
No, I do not agree with that. I think the precision of what we are seeing take place and the fact that they are methodically going. It's like the Israelis are going on a targeted attack of the leadership and the cast of characters, and the United States is going after military and intelligence capabilities like missile silos and the nuclear weapons places, and also the Iranian Navy. So I believe that they are very methodical. It may not sound like it to us because we don't know all the details behind the scenes. But what we should not do is to come out and second guess this, because when we say it, then the Islamic regime's propaganda machine will come and say, oh, look, these folks are doubting, so Trump doesn't know anything. So we are rightful in trying to, A, sustain the course, and B, to provide an alternative to the Americans and say, hey, you didn't want Khamenei, no problem. We'll bring Arafi, and then he will become your stooge, or we will just go to Hassan Rouhani and say, hey, why don't you come along and take charge? And the Americans will just be happy and go home. I think for those of us who are, and we have this platforms and podiums to talk to the people, we have to be very careful as to what we say and how we say it, because the Islamic regime will take advantage.
To be fair to Karim, I think what he was referring to in particular was Trump's tweets or X's or Truth Socials or whatever being somewhat difficult to follow, because he's still talking about a deal, and then he goes back to, we're going to get rid of these guys, and so that's usually Trump is such an exception because he's in his own category. For if he was a traditional leader, we would say, well, this person seems confused, and I suppose that's where the comment came from.
And I wholeheartedly agree. Karim is a dear friend, and he's a perfect analyst for these types of things. But what I'm saying is that the Islamic Republic is going to take advantage of that type of a conversation. But I totally agree.
Not just the Islamic Republic. I mean, as to your point, the Western media. Trump has created chaos. Nobody knows what's going on. There's got, which kind of is interesting, because it seems like on the face of it, the opposite of what has been a very specific, targeted plan for the first couple of days, at least. Behnam, how do you react to that statement that it doesn't look like appears to be making it up as he's going along?
The president has strategically cultivated ambiguity here. If I have to tell you, the through line or the operating principle of Trump in 2025 on Iran, the first year of term 2, the president quite literally pursued all options and every option on the table. Traditionally for an 8-year, 2-term presidency, you will get, political capital behind one view, one policy, and they'll take that to the edge. President Trump in 9 months pursued 4 drastically different policies against Iran. So, critique and also observation is there is a lot of breadth on Iran. There is not always a lot of depth on Iran from the president. Now, the depth could be brought personally rather than politically or professionally. The president may have a view. There might be an overwhelming zeitgeist as to regime bad, and from that could flow the rest of the conversation of here's why it's bad. They're trying to kill us. They have a fatwa against me. Threats to the homeland, terrorism, killing U.S. forces, hostage crisis, 1979. It might not be quote unquote professional, but there's a whole host of vivid things that the president has that orients and animates him towards dealing with the Iran threat. And the strategic cultivation of ambiguity, the president, Congress and the public always loves clear paths and lock in, and the president and the intel community and people who work on policy love flexibility. But that divergence is brought to 11 under Trump, both through the personal style and also due to the willingness to, have our allies guess exactly what we're doing next, as well as our adversaries. Just to learn from experience, if we look at and I'm not picking on Axios here, but if we just look at the Axios reporting from April 2025 to June 2025, when the negotiations, quote unquote, were going on, it looked like Israel and America were all over the place. But then you got to June 2025, and they're singing from the same sheet of music. this is why we have to take a camcorder, a video view, like a wider lens view to the situation and not react to the first thing and not treat life like a series of screenshots and short stories. And again, this is why my reaction to anybody, loved one, friend, family member, acquaintance, contact, whatever, since January and February has just been wait, has just been wait. It's like one of our beautiful mosaics, a little fragment of turquoise means nothing. But once you fit it into the larger picture with the lapis and with the whatever, it tells you of something much bigger. But to hold it up and say, what the heck is this? Makes no sense at all. But to put that piece into context. And I think Trump has an overwhelming personal view as to what should happen. But he's open to all options. And I think, just to end with this, why we can't take the premature victory lap and why we have to guide the president with the protests, with the rhetoric, with our involvement in the media, with honest analysis, is precisely because I think he is open. I think he is open, as any American leader would be open to the musical chairs at the top. Because if you deal with the foreign policy threats, well, it's not going to be a foreign policy issue. But it was the Islamic Republic that opted to make all of these things an issue. And so I think it is possible with the introduction of military force at this level. Three things can happen. And I've said this before. It's evolution, devolution, and revolution. And only the last one benefits us, this nationalistic population inside and outside of Iran as a society. Otherwise, the first two, very dangerous.
Let me ask you about the musical chairs, because if one of the distinguishing characteristics of this Islamic Republic regime that has allowed it to remain in power is if it has been its ability to replicate itself to a certain extent, to have a bunch of people in the waiting so that you knock off a few of the top guys and there's immediately people who replace them who know the agenda. How realistic is that now? How possible is that now? I know it's one of the $1 million questions, but in other words, can you as easily replace the kind of folks that have been knocked out now, like the Supreme Leader himself? Behnam, what's your thought on that?
Sure. So I think there's a difference between that which you're saying, which is the clip, which kind of just comes up from the bureaucracy, than musical chairs, which is what I fear. Musical chairs is you go to the fringes and you marry quote unquote far regime dissidents with a far regime political figure, and you say, look, this is substantive change, where in reality it's stylistic change. And for us, again, hypothetically, to transpose our politics and our worldview, it would be to say, look, it's Tajzadeh and Rouhani, and therefore this is change. But this is stylistic change, and in my view, not necessarily substantive change. It's not like where there is a real clip of people that comes and it's seamless is IRGC Aerospace Force, Hajizadeh leaves, Majid Mousavi comes. Those two guys are singing from the same sheet of music. They fought in the Iran-Iraq war together. They're part of that initial group of people that served with Hassan Tehrani Mogattam that formed Iran's missile command at that time. This is where there's a difference between the bureaucracy just moving up and musical chairs among the political elite. And it would be a real shame for all this blood to have been spilled, for the introduction of conflict onto Iranian territory to come, for everyone just have to settle for a slightly different Islamic Republic.
Well, how realistic is it? I mean, how much are Iranians inside Iran going to put up with that?
They won't put up with that, which is why if the West thinks that this equals stability, it's sorely mistaken. One reason why Iran is not Venezuela is that the operation against Maduro, which involved a regime insider and had the musical chairs elements, well, it wasn't predated by the biggest protests in the history of Venezuela. Right. It wasn't predated by a decade of nationwide uprisings, and it wasn't predated by the most mass crackdown, not just in the 47-year history of the Islamic Republic, but in 200 years of contemporary Iranian history.
Shayan?
I totally agree, because the mere fact is that it is incumbent upon all of us who are in the outside and have the capacity to talk to the media and to the policymakers, is to remind them that a Hassan Rouhani is no different than what Ali Khamenei was presenting. They may come and say nice things, they may come and use sexy words, but at the same time, they are not going to be bringing back the change that the people of Iran have been asking and have been demanding. So what we have to do is to keep reminding that Islamic Republic in its entirety and its in mindset notion has been rejected by the people, and it has to be rejected by the world community. They should not give them a lifeline, or they should not fall for their juxtapositions that when they say, oh, we can do this, or we can create such and such a change, or we can bring about such and such a change. That is notwithstanding. We also have a duty to make sure that we are expressing the Iranian people's will to the free world.
In terms of thank you guys, by the way, for doing this, and I'll just keep you for a couple more questions, and then let you go to all the other places that are, I'm sure, asking you to speak right now. In terms of the power vacuum element that we keep hearing about, certainly in the Western media. Now what? There's a power vacuum. One of the distinguishing factors of Iran from, say, the examples that keep getting used, look at what happened in Iraq or Syria, etc., is that there is a de facto opposition leader right now. And the Western media almost seems obsessively to not want to talk about Prince Reza Pahlavi, but there's this person whose name has been chanted and who there is relative consensus amongst Iranians inside and outside Iran can at least be the leader of the transition, and that makes this a different situation in terms of there being a person and a plan for a potential future past what is currently there. Do you see it that way, that this is a different scenario, notwithstanding the relative silence of the Western media in terms of wanting to speak about or speak to the Prince Reza Pahlavi, Shayan?
Yeah, but the mere fact, again, is that comes back to us. We have to go and talk to the Western media, and we have to dissociate their minds from what they keep thinking. Oh, what happened in 1953, or the United States have been disengaged or that engaged, or done this or done that. That's one. And number two, keep bringing up the subject that, oh, during your father's reign, we had this problem and that problem. And like Scott Pelley asked last night, your father's era had the vibe of being very opulent. Really? You haven't seen the opulence that the Islamic Republic have been using, or haven't seen the reports that Khamenei's son has amassed so much wealth in Germany and in the United Kingdom? So this is what we also need to go and dissociate from, so that they will see Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi as the alternative, that, again, not that Jian, Behnam, and Shayan are talking about it. No, the people of Iran came to the streets, gave their blood, and unanimously called on his name. Whether we like it or not, that's what the people of Iran are asking. And they're not saying he become the king. They're just saying he becomes the transitional leader. So we need to make sure that the messaging is right, and the messaging is delivered consistently and precisely.
Yeah, I was listening to Michael Smerconish this morning, who I quite like in general, but I mean, he was saying the problem is we have no idea what the people inside Iran want. It's too hard to, and it's kind of like, well, actually, they were chanting someone that, first of all, they came out in the millions, knowing that they were doing so at the risk of death, and then I was
listening to him, and I almost wanted to say, hey, buddy, give me a call. I'll explain it.
Yeah, I know, and to a certain extent, it's lack of information. He kept saying Khomeini, and it's hard for these guys to get their head around the names sometimes. But Behnam, what's your take on this in terms of the difference of this situation compared to let's call them bad examples of intervention in the recent past?
So there's a couple things to disaggregate, but the first that you mentioned about the failed state fear, that is a real fear. That is the devolution model. Either it coarsens into some IRGC national security deep state, or it becomes a failed state. But let me just say, and this might sound crazy, but we were headed there anyway. The Islamic Republic, the governance style of Ali Khamenei, was driving Iran to failed state status anyway. And for someone like me, who is just in real life, in practical life, so cautious, so conservative, why would I advocate for this position? It is precisely because we have paid forward all the costs of regime change already without getting any of the dividends of it. You don't want a refugee crisis? I don't either. But keeping the Islamic Republic in power has led to massive refugee crisis, with them helping Syria and the refugee crisis there that affected the demographic and political balance in Europe. You don't want loose fissile material and loose nukes? I don't want either. But guess what? There's 460 plus kilograms of highly enriched uranium missing while this regime is in power. You don't want a crazy military with no command and control either? Guess what? IRGC just said on TV in English, we don't control the targets. These guys just fire at what they want to fire at, which is why they're firing at hotels and random buildings just across the Persian Gulf. You have issues with rising ethno-nationalism in the periphery and drawing more lines in the sand of the region. Well, the longer the Islamic Republic has been in power, the more it's balkanized and it's atomized Iranian society. So many of the costs of traditionally destabilizing, quote unquote, or risky policies have already been paid. And this was my criticism of the GCC countries during the negotiations. And I said this quite loudly. I said, they are making the analytical mistake that stasis with the Islamic Republic equals stability.
Right.
They are making that cardinal error in their judgment, and now they are the first ones suffering from it. For Qatar to shut off LNG, for Saudi Arabia to be saying these things, for UAE to be saying these things, for Oman, which was mediating and now has been hit. The chicken finally has really come home to roost. Forgive me for using that phrase. So that's my view on the leadership vacuum. We already have been living it. It's really just a matter of volume. And that is why it's imperative for America, not even from the perspective of charity, but from the perspective of doing right by itself, to look at the opposition, to look at the alternatives, to look at what is being said, and to say, which one is the most congruent with my interests? If I want peace, prosperity, and stability in this region, as Trump said in the national security strategy that came out late winter of last year, what is the best pathway to that? Is locking in the Islamic Republic the best pathway to that, or pushing past it? And can I actually draw on the population? Do I have to social engineer them like I did in Afghanistan and Iraq to no avail for 10, 20 years? Or is there a population that is already the most pro-American, already the most pro-Israeli, despite having the most anti-American and the most anti-Israeli government? Is there a force I can work with? And to, throw cold water on people who under bullets are saying Javid Shah is really a gross moral and perhaps even more gross strategic misunderstanding of the facts on the ground in Iran today.
Yeah.
Bravo.
Behnam, let me ask you about the, since you mentioned it, and I've been looking forward to asking you in particular about this, and to hear from Shayan, about the Islamic Republic regime's strategy of somewhat randomly attacking all of the countries nearby. We have an interesting zeitgeist in amongst Iranians around the world, where with this regime that, of course, people are tired of, and this regime that has presided over such horrific atrocities for 47 years, stolen the people's lives, etc. All of that. We have this kind of polity where we, on the one hand, lampoon them as a bunch of clowns, and on the other hand, you'll hear Iranians saying to each other, they're really smart. They know what they're doing. They're really wise at this. They know how to stay in power. These guys, they've been working on this apparatus for years, etc. I couldn't figure out the strategy this weekend when I saw bombs dropping on, or ballistic missiles, etc., aimed at a hotel in Dubai or Bahrain, and I was thinking, at first I was trying to play on my old poli-sci graduate, okay, this is to get those states to pressure the United States to not do this. I'm trying to work it all out, and I couldn't quite get there because it just seems so kamikaze in not a complimentary way. What was the strategy behind this, Behnam?
Well, I think it was several-fold, but the regime had been saying very early, and this is one of the few times they were singing from the same sheet of music, political officials, religious officials, military officials, that they would widen the war because they expected America's attack to be a limited attack. So they said, we can't take this lying down. We have to widen the war to prevent a wider war against us. And in so doing, they made the same logical fallacy and assumption, which proved fatal for them in the Iran-Iraq war, where even though Saddam was the first one to target energy, Iran was the first one to widen and internationalize, was the word, the targeting to Kuwait and Saudi Arabia way back then, which was providing Saddam with support. But Iran targeted their tankers, and that actually, rather than get Iran support from the international community, that actually drew the superpowers in. And actually, that is the backdrop through which CENTCOM is created after those missions. So here the regime was thinking, let me internationalize the conflict. Let me do pain
by antagonizing people who
exactly.
I mean, it doesn't make sense.
It has a caricature. It has a caricature. It doesn't. It's not a it's not a strategist. It's a tactician. It's more. It's not a Bismarck or a Kissinger. It's with immense respect. And my father is Bazari. I could say this. It's a Bazari style. It's a one-shot game approach. And they said, let us spook these guys who we believe have no backbone anyway, and let's spook oil prices. And let's spill a little bit of blood to create a cycle of violence that will force America. And this is the next caricature. They only see, you look at hardline media in Iran, they only see Trump through the Tucker Carlson lens, through the isolationist right lens. They don't see that Donald Trump has done these interventions. They don't see that Donald Trump, the one clear red line for him is the use of force, is if you spill American blood, we will use force against you. And they thought actually if they spill blood early enough, that'll force a more restraint-oriented president and a more cowering regional order to kind of go together and de-escalate. So that which the regime thought would be a deterrent, which is basically terrorism, actually is an inducement for a wider war. And in so doing, they may end up sealing their fate and deliver a fatal blow to them, just like the mistakes during the Iran-Iraq war.
It's early on, but how has this manifested itself so far, vis-a-vis, say, Qatar or UAE?
Shayan, you want to? I spoke a lot, but I'm happy to.
Shayan, you can. I'm going to come to you anyway, but go ahead. Why don't I
I'll add later. I'm enjoying this. Go.
How it manifests itself? 180-degree opposite.
Exactly.
If all of these countries are signing press statements with America that ultimately are backstopped by press statements by the E3 condemning this move, now the UK is allowing America to use its air bases. Weren't you afraid of a wider war? Now you just got one. Weren't you trying to spook the UAE? The UAE is now signing a press statement with Bahrain and Iraq and Jordan and the United States of America. That which you tried to do to pull apart has actually forced these actors together. And this will have second, third order ramifications where I think I have to double check the story, but today, not only did Qatar shut off its LNG production, but I think Qatar shot down an Iranian fighter. Two. There you go. The last time this happened, also in the Iran-Iraq war, the Saudis shot down an Iranian fighter, chased one out, and told America, this is how you have to behave with the Iranians.
So to crudely summarize your eloquence, it was a dumb move, or an epically dumb move by the Islamic Republic regime, right? Shayan, please, go ahead.
To just add to what Behnam so eloquently put, the Islamic Republic, they have not understood what it means to be political and to have strategic communication capabilities, because what they have started to do is fear mongering. To just their behavior seems like a kid who goes to his mom and dad and says, I want some cookies. They say, no, it's not a good time for it. And then he picks up all his crayons and starts painting and scratching all the walls in the house. So what they are doing is they're just throwing the kitchen sink at everybody, hoping that one of them is going to come to the United States and say, hey, boys, we can't handle this. Stop. Our livelihood is in danger. It was the reverse action. When did you see Qatar in the last 3 weeks or 4 weeks not support the Islamic Republic? They went to the end of time and to extreme lengths to just create a solution for them to stay in power. Now they're shooting down their aircraft. So basically, the Islamic Republic thought that they are creating a mishmash on the regional scene so they can take advantage of it. But what they have done is they brought the neighboring countries all together and under the umbrella of the United States and Israel. Good luck.
Okay, guys, a final question. And I'm not going to ask you what is going to happen because I know that the crystal ball questions are unfair and difficult in this moment. But tell me what you're most looking for or hoping to see perhaps in the next in the coming days. Shayan, and then we'll end with you, Behnam.
What I'm hoping for is the wherewithal of the Iranian opposition to come out with a simple, unified message so the world community cannot say, oh, This is going to lead to balkanization. This group wants this and this and that. Unless they get that, they're not going to support the crown prince. If we rally around one message and one leader, the world community realizes, hey, they've got their act together. All we have to do is to sustain and stay the course and diminish the first, second, third tiers of leadership. And these people have the capacity to take over and run the ball and go the distance. So that's number one that I hope that will happen. And that requires a little bit of selflessness that we're hoping to impose. Next, I hope that the world community stays together. I hope that the pressure in the United States doesn't get too much for Trump to pull the brakes. Trump himself has said he at least envisions this to be a 4 weeks campaign. And we have to do everything we can to remind them an Islamic Republic 2.0 is going to be worse than the 1.0 version. So they need to stay the course and create the situation for a regime change. Regime change should be the modus operandi for all of us.
Did you see Hegseth this morning?
Yes.
I mean, he seemed determined to kind of say this is not going to be a long one. We're in and out.
But I think in between his words, he also mentioned that this is something that when the president says stop, we will stop. And the president has asked us to make it a sustained campaign. So, and then it is not the first time that Hegseth and Trump have said opposite things.
Yes,
and then
that's also true.
Really misunderstood.
Yes. Behnam, last word to you.
Just on that, as someone who wants, if now that we're talking about military power, now that those eggs have been cracked, now that Rubicon has been crossed, whatever other analogies we want to employ, it has to be worthwhile for the Iranian people. And the only way to make it worthwhile is that this power, which air power in general does not have a good track record alone for regime change, but that this power nonetheless is able to pave the pathway for Iranians to get back out onto the street, or pave the pathway to do what Trump said in one of his tweets, which was take over your institutions, or pave the pathway to confront what's left of the national security state and get them to defect and get them to get out there. For that to happen, the current mission that the US and that the Israelis are undertaking has to be successful, which is not decapitation, it has to be defanging. The operation against the missile program has to be successful. There is a way in which America can make it more successful. So what I'm looking at the success or the shortcomings of the defanging operation, not just defending against Iranian missiles, not just targeting the launchers, but collapsing the facilities that are underground, that are not as deep as Fordo, but nonetheless are underground, that house the missiles and that house the launchers. You want to rob the capacity of this regime to respond, such that once it gets to a critical point and it's weak, it can't internationalize the crisis again, and that opens up space for the next mission. And the next mission I would like for both the Israelis and the Americans is to move from targeting the regime's foreign policy coercive apparatus to targeting the regime's domestic apparatus. And the tools you need for that are fundamentally different tools. So I would like to see America succeed.
That's what I was going to. Sorry, I lied by saying
into the counter. Yeah, to go to the counter repressive apparatus mission.
I lied by saying that was the final. I mean, I have to ask you, but since you've just said something quite provocative, does defanging for lack of a better term, the military tools, is that would the defanging of the nuclear programs or the ballistic programs or the ability to attack outside Iran? What does that alone is not enough to empower the Iranian people? Admiral James Stavridis was on the radio this morning and said we do want boots on the ground. We want the sneakers of the Iranian people, to get back out there. Is defanging enough to allow Iranians to get back out? Or, I mean, the regime apparatus to still crack down brutally and massacre people still exists, right?
Precisely. Because a country, particularly authoritarian regimes that lose wars abroad, tend to come home and crack skulls. And militaries that tend to be poorly suited to fight foreign adversaries actually often have enough suppressive firepower to kill unarmed domestic adversaries. So if America or if Israel has its targeting, like the 12-day war targeting, well, then they should not be surprised that the behavior of the Iranian people after the war also resembles the behavior during the 12-day war, which is to step back and run and hide and duck for cover. But if they move, if they help to go to the next mission, if they pave the pathway, if they shift from operation thinking to campaign thinking, and not big and expensive, but slow and cheap, but protracted, they can actually tip the playing field and get a political win. Otherwise, America will have a military win. It'll be Islamic Republic without ballistic missiles. But that's still an Islamic Republic. And there's no universe that I know of where if you bomb a missile base in Khorramabad, a protester in Mashhad feels safe.
And
go ahead, Shayan.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something. If we do that and create a national reconciliation conference where all the political groups would come with the media present, live broadcasting, everybody state their case and say what it takes for them to come together, that will also bring a message to the world community that, hey, there is an alternative available. So we should not let go of the gas pedal. We should sustain this. And that will also bring the Iranian people and the Iranian sneakers to the streets so that once and for all, this despotic regime would be dumped.
Yeah, I started the show by talking about how we need to make the case that a free Iran, I'm not the first one to say this, obviously, but it's been repeated, but to amplify the message that a free Iran is actually good for business for the whole world on a number of levels. So, because we have to appeal to them in their own self-interests, right? I mean, we've learned over the years nobody's going to do it because they care about human lives necessarily, but if we can make the case that, hey, build your Trump hotel in Mashhad. Go, go for it. I mean, you're gonna enjoy a
Trump Tower in Tehran.
That's right. You're gonna enjoy an open market of 90 million people that you can thrive in. Gentlemen, I really appreciate this. Thanks for the time. Thanks for the information and the education, and it's always a pleasure to have both of you on, and to have you on both on the same show was quite a treat. Thank you for this.
Real pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Khodafis.
Khodafis.
Heady days ahead. Every day, as you know, if you're Iranian anywhere around the world watching this, obviously inside Iran as well, but in the diaspora, every day is a new adventure. And that sort of toggling between the elation that we feel at times and the deflation we feel at times. Who knows what's to come, but fingers crossed. And big thanks to Behnam and to Shayan. What a dynamic duo. That was a really invigorating panel. Really appreciate those guys making the time. You can give us your thoughts on that panel. If you disagree, if you have anything in particular to say, info@roqemedia.com. You can send us an email there, info@roqemedia.com. Or, of course, you can post in the comment sections of any of our platforms, including on YouTube or on Apple Podcasts. Yeah, you can do that there, Telegram, etc., Instagram, of course. This is full time for Roqe for today. Thank you to the amazing core team who put this show together twice a week. Thank you to Super P, Parisa Sanjarani. Thank you to Sabi Roham Meher, and to Tina Farahi, the photo and video queen. Special thanks as well to our extended Roqe family and team, Smart Pega, Charming Kimia, Talented Anahita, Methodical Kabe, and the Rising Keon for your help. Thank you to all of you out there who support us and share our content. If you haven't subscribed on any or all of our platforms, please do so. It's free, and you can be a subscriber so you make sure that you get all the content up to date. Feel free as well on something like YouTube to press the like button or to put comments there as well. You can find the show on Instagram at Roqe Media. You can find me on Instagram at Jian Ghomeshi. And as ever, Mizun Bashi.